And now we are recording. um, so on to the communication issue about Senate. While we are working on some of those larger issues about how Senate will communicate the work that we are doing, we need you to communicate with your campuses. And that part of that will be ensuring that you can communicate without any interference or difficulty, without any difficulty with your campus. So I will be working in the next couple of weeks with IT to ensure that all of you have the necessary permissions. There are 39 of us, and I believe at this point there are about 22 different ways that folks communicate with their campuses. So we are working to try to streamline that and make it uniform for everyone. This is going to be important as more folks want to attend as guests. It looks like we have a number of guests today, and I welcome you to Senate. I will share with you that if you are here as a guest, we don't have time for guests to participate in discussion. That is limited to senators. And on that note, if you are a sitting senator, please add SEN to the beginning of your WebEx handle so that your vote is counted. Otherwise, we cannot keep track of voting. So the only way that we can manage appropriate voting is if you add SEN to your handle. So thank you for taking care of that. I have sent it via email, and you will find the instructions for how to do that there. So communications, email, we are probably overdue for circling back to a conversation about shared governance, and that is on our agenda. However, I have just become aware that President Maduka will not be available until between 1:30 and 1:45. So that is going to trigger significant changes to our agenda. So what I would like to do is, I can't ask for an approval of the agenda because it has now changed. And
Well,
what I go ahead.
I was going to say, could we move to approve the agenda with a change to move President Maduko's comments until he is able to join us?
Well,
Are you comfortable with that?
actually, Roberta, what I'm going to ask you to do, and can you all see the, I'm sharing a revised agenda.
Yes.
So I'm actually asking you to approve a revised agenda, which will include approving this agenda and then the minutes. We will then go to old business. This item has just been requested, returning to a discussion of the final exam schedule.
Okay.
I expect it to be a relatively brief conversation, but it is an important one. And then we will move on to the APP for new business. And then we will have our initial meetings, our initial committee meetings for 30 minutes. I believe that this should give us time for President Maduko to join. Not only do we want him to be a part of the shared governance discussion, but we want him to be a part of the budget discussion. So I am asking you to approve or suggest changes to this revised agenda.
That said, I move to approve the revised agenda as presented at today's meeting.
I second.
Alan, I second. So.
Okay.
Well, then I third.
All those in favor? All those in favor?
A little discussion first, I think, because someone had their hand up. Someone had their hand up.
Thank you, Roberta.
Not a problem.
Michelle, you have a discussion? You were voting. Thank you.
So yes, I was voting, putting my hand up.
Okay. Any discussion on the revised agenda? Michelle?
Putting my hand down.
Hearing no discussion, all those in favor of adopting the revised agenda, please raise your hands now. Thank you, folks. I do appreciate. All right, John,
We're at 30 for yes.
30 for yes. Go ahead and lower your hands.
Real quick, we have somebody who is voting that does not have senator in front of their name. Just want to make sure if we counted that name or not.
Who was that, Nick?
It's me, Asante.
Was it me? No, it was another one too. It was.
It might have been Joe Savaggio. I'm trying to find the.
I can edit their display names real quick if you want.
Okay, thank you, John. And they are both sitting senators, so thank you. Thank you for keeping an eye on that. We are trying to monitor folks, and we did have a change in Senate representation, and we went back and checked to make sure that no votes that the outcome of any votes was not adversely impacted from our last meeting. So we did take that action between meetings.
Who was the other person I was suggesting?
Jennifer. Jennifer needs. She voted, but she does not have senator in front of her name.
Oh, she does now. Oh, wait, no. Scrolling through names.
We need Joe Salavaggio.
Joe Salavaggio. Okay.
Yeah.
Hi, this is Jen. I added it. It's showing now.
Yep, thank you. All right, folks, we have adopted the new agenda. Can I get you to please turn your attention to the minutes from our October meeting? Is there a motion to accept the minutes from our October meeting?
So moved.
Motion by Roberta. Is there a second?
Second, Merdad.
Second.
Merdad is a second. Any discussion? Roberta?
I just have a little correction on page 4. Where is it? There was just an extra S on my last name, so. I'm sorry, top of page 5, number 3. Just remove the S. It's tiny, but that's it.
Thank you. Any other changes? All those in favor of adopting the minutes as amended? John?
34.
Okay, all of those, go ahead and lower your hands. Any opposed?
Two opposed.
No. 2 opposed? And any abstentions? John, what is the outcome of the vote?
Seth has not lowered his hand from the opposed. All right, so 1 abstention.
Okay. Brian, did you capture that?
I'm sorry about that, everybody. That was a yes vote. I'm sorry. I wouldn't. Sorry about that.
Brian, you're on mute.
Sorry, typing at the same time. So then Seth would be 35. Did we have 1 opposed then?
John, did we have one in opposition or none?
I think we just need to ask again because
Okay.
I thought it was 2, but I don't recall.
It was
Did-
2, but Seth lowered his hand, so that would be only 1.
Yeah.
Miguel, is your hand up?
Yeah, but I want to finish this discussion. I had a quick question for you.
Okay, thank you. Folks, if you opposed approving the minutes, please raise your hand. If you opposed approving the minutes, please raise your hand.
Okay, so that's a unanimous vote. We're good, Al.
Okay, thank you. And there were no abstentions, John? Okay. All right.
Al, I just had a quick question for you, which is, I noticed you weren't voting. You know, you have the right to vote. You're a senator, so your vote counts.
Miguel, I would love to have the capacity to be able to vote, but most of the time I am lost. I am otherwise engaged trying to keep everyone else voting.
What I might suggest, if that becomes too cumbersome, is as the vote tallies come up, you know, and you call for raise your hand, lower your hand, you can just announce what your vote is, and that way your vote is captured. But your vote needs to be counted because you're a senator.
That is a fair and accurate point. I like the workaround.
We did have 1 abstention in that last vote.
1 abstention. Okay, thank you. All right, folks, we have moved on, and the amended agenda. The amended agenda brings us to the issue of the final exam schedule from old business. Is the provost here yet? Dr. Brown, are you with us?
Good afternoon, everyone. I am. Happy Friday.
Happy Friday. Thank you. So I just wanted to make sure that you and Mike were here before we started this discussion. Sarah, are you here? Sarah Perez?
Can you hear me?
Just barely, Sarah.
Is that better?
Yes. So was there a particular question, or were you just wanting to revisit this topic more generally?
I think I kind of wanted to revisit the topic more generally for discussion. I mean, I know we all discussed that, you know, it's, you know, and I know that Mike had mentioned at the September meeting that it, you know, that there was many different, you know, start times, and they tried to make it so that it worked for the most amount of campuses and start times. So I recognize that. I really wanted to ask, I know that this semester is what it is right now. We have 3 weeks left. But I wanted to ask about the spring semester and if there was a way, you know, to give input or to maybe have a small subcommittee or something where we could kind of work with leadership to kind of look at the final exam schedule or offer feedback at least.
So I want to open this topic up for discussion, but I do also want to let folks know that the Council of Faculty will meet with Provost Brown on November 29th at 4 o'clock, and this is one of our agenda items. However, that does not change that Senate wants to have this discussion now. I just want you to be aware that we will have a more in-depth conversation at that time. Provost Brown or Mike, can either of you speak to if there is a draft final exam schedule for spring semester and what that process is? And if
So I'll jump in really quickly, and Mike definitely has been working more closely with this particular opportunity. Definitely, this is top of mind. We have pulled together in conversation some of the brilliant minds just to figure out a path forward. Mike has been leading the way. He's been partnering in conversations with other internal stakeholders, including a recent conversation with the academic deans during the Dean's Council to get perspective and feedback. And so, Mike, I'll turn it over to you to fill in the details of the good work that's been going on.
Sure. So just to give everyone a quick update real quickly. So the final exam schedule was published at the end of August, beginning of September. There were lots of concerns raised. I did speak to this at the September meeting a little bit. We did revisit the topic at the Academic Dean's Council about 4 weeks ago and had a discussion about whether we should look at alternatives for fall or not. And the Dean's Council at that time did decide to stick with what was published. In the meantime, I did continue to get feedback and concerns forwarded to me from deans and others. And we actually looked at an alternative for either fall or spring. The original final exam schedule was designed to have 5 or 6 main blocks of finals, and everything fit in there. They were 2-hour and 20-minute finals with, I think, with 20 minutes in between. We did look at an alternative model, which would be about at least 9 blocks that some of the larger schools have been using, Tungus, Manchester, I think Gateway. And I presented that to the deans again last week. Actually, I presented it about a week ago, and then we discussed it on Tuesday about the possibility of a pivot to that alternative schedule, either for this semester or for spring. For this semester, I shared some options. One, which is to stick with what was published. 2 was to try to pivot, knowing though that it's 3 weeks away and we've already agreed to go with the published, but I want to revisit that again. And then the third was basically to schedule the final exam week the same as weeks 1 through 14. So those were kind of 3 options that we had a discussion at. The Academics Dean Council on Tuesday, again, reaffirmed staying with the current schedule, but did it like the alternative schedule and thought that it would be helpful to investigate that for the spring semester. So we have had a scheduling committee in the past, and we can certainly regroup and invite folks to join that, to look at that and see the implications for spring. One thing, again, I will share is that although we suggested about 160 common time blocks around the state, we ended up with almost 800 unique class times, not sections, but different times of classes, which makes the final exam schedule especially challenging. However, the alternative version has almost every final starting at the normal start time, or perhaps a 10 minutes off. So I think it would resolve a lot of the concerns that folks had. And I'm happy to share that version with this group and gather feedback as we move forward and start planning for the spring semester. Thanks.
Provost Brown.
Yeah, let me add one thing also. Based off of the recommendations that Mike received from the Academic Dean's Council, there are plans to take that forward also right to the campus CEOs and presidents for the upcoming cabinet meeting on Monday as well. So those are recommendations. So we want to share that it's not a final decision, but we are sharing the recommendations with the broader leadership group as well as we share it with you all.
Okay. Mike, could you go ahead and share that with the Senate? And we will, I am very confident that this dedicated group of people will get you feedback prior to Monday so that can also be considered for cabinet.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Any other questions, folks?
Quick question for me.
Yep.
So just to summarize the whole thing, we're sticking with the already published fall schedule, but the spring schedule is going to be discussed and it's going to be published later on, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Yes, correct.
Um, Alan,
Thanks, Elle. Yeah, I just did want to, first of all, thank you for, taking the time to look at adjusting the schedule for the spring. And just, I guess I'd like to request, I know that these are, you're involving academic deans and the cabinet, but because there has been so much discussion at this on the campuses, I'd like to request that, final decisions wait until perhaps the faculty do have the opportunity to meet with Dr. Brown in just over a week, maybe 2 weeks, right? And the Council of Faculty, so that we do have the chance to review it and provide input before any final decisions are made. So that is a request I would like to make.
okay. We will follow up an email and make sure that administration management is aware of that request, Alan.
Thank you.
All right. Any final comments? Mayor Dodd.
Yes, thank you. I just wanted to reiterate that our dean has sent out a schedule for our review. So it almost sounds like it was final, but I guess they will be communicated with, right? That this is still fluid.
Mayor Dodd, was the schedule for spring?
This is, it says the final exam. I thought it was for spring. Let me just look again.
It could have been. I did send the
No, I
alternate
beg your pardon.
schedule.
Not. You're right. No, you're correct.
I did send the alternate schedule to deans and asked for their feedback. Some of them may have shared with campuses, but again, this was a preliminary discussion.
Gotcha. Yes.
And then that recommendation will be going to cabinet on Monday to the CEOs and so forth. Again, what the deans were recommending was staying with what was published. I think to minimize disruption, and many of the deans had said that they were making, local accommodations if there were conflicts or room issues.
Okay, I stand corrected.
So that's
Thank
the
you.
recommendation going
Yes.
forward.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any final questions, comments, thoughts, concerns? Very good. Seeing none, that finishes old business. Rather than moving on to new business, President Maduco has joined us. Welcome, President Maduco. Are you ready to ready to address Senate? And from there, we will move into a discussion about shared governance and then the budget. And then we will have our final item of the APP committee. So we have attempted to accommodate your schedule as we have adjusted our agenda.
Well, good afternoon, Professor Vandermark and everyone. Am I ready to address this group? I don't think I'm ever ready, but yes. And I'm here in Middlesex. I'll be in and out, providing an update and some content for this folks, but I'm here to answer questions. And I had shared, I have an IEP meeting for my son. So I have a hard stop. That's non-negotiable, but please, I feel free to send the complaint if you have an issue with that, but I don't apologize to attend IEP meetings. I know many of you know what that means. So yeah, let's get this started. Real quickly, just as a recap, I really want to commend everyone on this call and your colleagues, our colleagues statewide, regarding just the advocacy that's been displayed regarding our students and our employees, and really the missional and operational needs of the college. It's been difficult, it's been challenging, it's been frustrating. People continue to express their feelings and their raw emotions regarding this entire matter in crisis. And I'll always be a proponent of supporting anyone's constitutional right to kind of express themselves. But it's been tough. It's been tough to see this. It's beyond the job. Obviously, we know that everything that's going on is impacting people. and impacting the way we know best when it comes to serving our students and providing top-notch programming and services and beyond. Obviously, as all of you are aware, we had the lovely Board of Regents meeting earlier in the week. Kind of chaotic with I mean, it was hot in there. There were people hissing. There are audio issues for at least the first 20 to 25 minutes. Like you name it, it happened. But I was proud of Carrie Kelly, our CFO, in terms of what she presented. And we did our best to kind of just provide the overview of our budget mitigation plan that was tasked of us and the other 5 institutions per the BOR and the chancellor. I reiterated or I conveyed that it's not a perfect plan, and it's not a plan for people to applaud or be happy with, because I'm not happy with the plan because it's showing it's summarizing extremely difficult decisions, right? It's trying to choose between your 2 children, right? You love them both and you want to support them fully, and it's been hard. We mean it when it comes to transparency. So we later on that evening, we shared the PowerPoint presentation and a comprehensive report that kind of details everything that led to the outcomes or proposed outcomes in the budget mitigation plan. Again, it's not a plan and report for people to be happy with. It's not a plan and report for people to be in agreement with. This country was built on debate. Hell, as ex officio, not even ex officio, I just sit here and you guys are arguing, right? We don't see eye to eye all the time, and that's not a bad thing because we all have different perspectives and lived experiences, but we felt we did the best that we could do under very constrained circumstances, and we're going to continue to engage with everybody as it relates to just budgeting and planning moving forward. Obviously, no decisions were made at the conclusion of the BOR. I'm sure the following BOR meeting there will be more discussions in terms of where do we go from here. We've extinguished the $33.6 million fiscal deficit for FY24. We have slashed by $50 million the $91.3 million FY25 deficit down to $41.3 million. And now we have that $41.3 million gap to kind of figure out what we do with. As I've said repeatedly in writing and in person and through this medium, no decisions have been made as it relates to what to do with that gap. And hopefully the advocacy that we're doing now, led by our bargaining units, led by our great faculty and staff and others, will hopefully sway the General Assembly and OPM and the governor's administration that, hey, you have to invest in us, or there's going to be significant harm, right? It's going to be significant harm not only to our people, first and foremost, both our students and employees, but the very things that people are expecting of us and look to us to provide statewide. And I think we can do a better job telling that story in terms of just how impactful we are from border to border and everything else in between. I still think we are trying to work on that message to say it's not just 70,000 students that we serve. We are in 10 correctional facilities. We are in conventional and technical high schools. We are everywhere, supporting a litany of industries and constituents and communities day in and day out on the backs of our great faculty and our staff. So I'll stop right there. I'm not sure if my colleague Carrie Kelly's on the call, but I'm happy to answer any questions you might have of me regarding what's been present. So here we go.
Dr. Meduco, Carrie had another meeting,
Yeah.
and so she was going to join later for the budget discussion. It is an agenda item that we're going to have after the shared governance discussion.
Okay.
Okay. I do see 2 hands. Let's see. Seth, given that the budget discussion is later in the agenda, do you still have a question?
Just a quick comment, and just want to thank you, President Duca, for the report, which was extremely detailed and thorough. And I do want to acknowledge the excellent job the team did in providing a truly detailed and thorough analysis of the mitigation items. So I wanted to certainly start with that. And then just I shared this in the email, but just to express my opinion that and I guess we'll talk about this later in the context of shared governance. But it wasn't clear what was meant by this document upheld the spirit of shared governance, because I didn't understand that this plan, was a shared governance plan by any stretch. So, but I put that in the email, and obviously the other senators are welcome to form their own conclusions. But with that said, I thought the transparency in the document was excellent, and I guess I'll save the other question about the budget for CFO Kelly.
Yeah, and again, I admit especially at the state level, is a work in progress, and I see the tremendous amount of work that all of you are doing, and it's not easy on top of your day jobs in terms of just continue to stabilize and build and refine our governance structure. The budget mitigation plan, think of it as Voltron and a transformer, right? It was fed by the campus, fed by our locations, right? Because a lot of those decisions took place locally in terms of, various campus CEOs and presidents having conversations with their leadership teams and their local councils in terms of, hey, here's our gap that we have to close. Like, how do we get there? But in terms of how that feeds up at the state level, that's a work in progress. And it too, you've also mentioned too, like, it wasn't like we were given a year or 6 months to work on this thing either. So again, like I said, again, Netflix couldn't make a story up like this, right? Like, in terms of all the things that have taken place. So I don't take that lightly. I don't think I've been in a good mood for a year, right? Just based on all the things that have been going on to our people, and we're feeling it. And hopefully people read in the report that, we own and we conveyed that, oh yeah, there is an impact. There is an impact to our mission, to our students, to what we're trying to do. And there's different opinions. Some CEOs said no, others said yes. I know Dr. Shazan Cardenas says, I think the spirit of DEI is upheld. And I know his context and frame in terms of, we have our affirmative action plans through the Human Rights Commission through the state. We have phenomenal local DEI centers and councils and colleagues who are doing the work, and we can see it. And I don't think we've backtracked from that. But I'm sure there are individual faculty and staff and leaders who are like, oh no, I disagree. This is impactful. And again, what we put out there is not for a unified agreement. It's more so of this is our overview to the best of our ability, and we're going to continue to work at it. So again, I appreciate your words, and I recognize we have work that needs to be done.
Seth, did you have another question? Your hand is still up. No. Okay. Angelo?
Hi. So given the unprecedented times and unprecedented decisions that are being made, trying to understand the process, how this works. So your mitigation plan is a proposal, or is a plan to be implemented?
I want to say it's a hybrid, right? So some things have been put in motion. For example, Housatonic, it was highlighted on Wednesday, and also is detailed in the plan. Housatonic, I believe, in partnership with Eversource and other energy providers, really adopted and implemented 50, I believe at least 50 energy saving strategies that led to significant savings there. So that's something we move forward to. Obviously, there's been the reduction of temporary staff. Obviously, there's been the reduction of managerial confidential staff. But in terms of specifically the use of reserves, technically the board has to approve that. So our proposal is to use X amount of reserves for 24, X amount of reserves for 25. But any use and allocation of reserves, that has to be submit as a motion and a request of the board for them to ratify before that actually can take place.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
And I have a feeling we're going to have kind of this bifurcated discussion about the budget because Carrie Kelly will be joining us a little later. So if you have more questions or comments, if you think of things in the interim, please capture them because we will revisit this.
Yeah.
If there is nothing else, Nick, if you could reset the clock, I would appreciate it. The next item on our agenda is a shared governance discussion. And we initially had a conversation about shared governance and what Senate was trying to do very early in our process as we had our first committee trying to define some bylaws and write a charter. But now I think we're returning to this as we have some more experience behind us, as we have encountered some more difficult and challenging issues. So the conversation or the discussion that we're bringing to you today is, what does it mean to have a statewide governance body, to have Senate? And we want this to be a discussion because we are building and defining and refining what it means to be senators. We are figuring out that sometimes we have dual responsibilities. We're advocating for our campus, but we're doing that from the lens of a statewide college, and needing to understand what it means, what the implications of our decisions are for other campuses. And that's a lot of work. It means that you can't just know what's happening at your campus. So with that in mind, what are some of the speed bumps that you've hit? How do you feel about statewide governance? How does it intersect with campus governance? Like, these are hard discussions, but they are timely and they are necessary. So Mark, you have your hand up.
I suppose what I would like to see is everything that we debate and then vote on have a number so that we can follow it along. Because, like, for example, we had the vote on CFT last time. So then that goes up to President Maduko, and the debate continues there. And it would just, I think there needs to be closure and resolution of the issues that we discuss and an ability to see it come back and what ultimately happened with that.
Thank you. Mark, you're talking about, you said, I think I heard you say assigning a number. But does that mean
kind of like a bill becoming a law, or with academic affairs, how each would have a number attached to it, just so that we can follow that piece of legislation all the way through the process.
Got it. I think that helped me. That helped. Thank you.
Thank you.
Kirsten.
Hi, everybody. So Mark and I also we both represent Tunxis, and this is so timely because I just wrote in our SharePoint document for campus concerns. And so I'm just going to kind of piggyback on what Mark had said and add that, I've been hearing in the halls at Tunxis and around our campus governance body, which we call PSO for Professional Staff Organization, that people are struggling with trying to find what the value is of a local governance. And, we have resolutions that come through and we vote on them to endorse or support, and then we're not sure what are the next steps. So I guess, in dealing with shifting from a local governance where we felt empowered, we're kind of wondering, like, where is the power or the strength on the local level, and also what are the next steps as a campus, supports something or makes a decision. We would like clarity on the efficacy of the process. Thank you.
Thank you. Please keep in mind, I don't have answers for these things. This is a dialogue to identify and discuss, and I doubt that this is the first time we will talk about it, but we are capturing them, okay? John?
So we had a conversation with local Senate leadership, some of them, and some of the management, and there was a question about the process of Senate and what the expectation was in the local Senate for questions that they had or issues that they had. And it was explained that the perception is that the local Senate would identify issues, and then their job would be to raise those issues and then notify management. And that would put the ball in management's court to decide whether or not they wanted to fix that issue or not fix that issue, which kind of came across as, fairly one directional. You know what I mean? It was like, here's a body that says, oh, there's an issue. Let's make everybody know that it's an issue, and then punt it over to management to solve. And my understanding of this body and maybe the way that I've done governance in the past is that there's some sort of role of the Senate to actually perform some of those actions and actually solve some of those problems and work in a more of a shared manner. But I understand that might not be the case. I mean, certainly for this campus, but across the campuses, we might all do local governance a little bit differently. And I think that there's a role here for our statewide Senate to play in maybe demonstrating maybe a slightly different mechanism for how we do work and the responsibility that we take as senators to actually do work versus just, notifying management that we have an issue. And I think there's probably good discussion. I don't know who wants to weigh in on that, or if now's an appropriate time, but to think through that so that we can, be a healthy example of what governance might look like in the future now that, we're CT State.
So John, I want to say that I think one of the reasons that I hear you talking about shared responsibility is because, and this is clearly articulated in all of my emails to all of you, that I see our role as having shared responsibility, that simply raising an issue is insufficient. And so rightly or wrongly, I have perhaps shaped some of how you see that. Yeah, I'll take that responsibility. Miguel.
Yeah, it's sort of echoing sort of a similar theme, but I think one of the issues that I've been seeing is we don't have a closed loop. And what might be helpful, I think, is to, if we could get a monthly summary of items that have been sent up to New Britain and their disposition. Have they been approved? Have they been rejected? Are they in process? That type of thing. Because then we can, the following month, discuss, these issues and say, oh, we have some ideas on this or whatever it might be. But I feel like that's where we've been getting stuck a little bit, is things go up and then we don't know what happened. And that would include things like resolutions and statements of beliefs and all of that, right? Whether it's a simple, we have received it, we are choosing not to act on this point, or whatever it might be. But I think a summary of actions by the New Britain office, that we could get, and that would be just a read document, right, that we could read in preparation for our meetings. I think that would be really helpful to inform our discussions and debates. Not that I'm trying to create more work for people, but.
No, actually, Miguel, I think what you're pointing to is something that I'm already doing internally, but I'm not sharing that summary with all of Senate. The executive council and I go back through the last couple of minutes and we try to identify what the open issues are. And to your point about resolutions, frequently the resolutions that have come to us haven't asked Senate to do anything in particular. And that is, of course, an issue that I have raised. But I think that I think the written summary as a document is a good enhancement. And if we couple that with some of the other suggestions, I think that we can make better progress. So thank you. Alan?
Thanks, Al. Yeah, just dovetailing with what Miguel just said and what Mark brought up initially. I mean, at Gateway, we have an actual form, recommendation to the CEO that accompanies any resolution or action by our governing body, the Faculty Staff Council. And it asks for a response. It may just be acknowledgement, you know, a receipt of it. It might not require any action on the part of the CEO, but you know, it's an acknowledgement that they've received it, or if it does require some action, what actions have been taken or are being taken. And so those are individualized to each vote of the Faculty Staff Council. So maybe that would, we don't number them, but we certainly could. And maybe something, you know, as common as that could help us keep track of all of our actions. Thanks.
So at the we have three more people, Rhonda, Angelo, and Brian, but these are some really good suggestions for being more effective and efficient. But I do want us to return to really the complexity of what it means. What are we doing, and how is our work different from, or how does it intersect with campus governance? I think we started with that question a little bit, but we need to cleave it open, because when we talk about governance at the campus level, even how we intersect with the governance bodies at the campus level, we don't have any official communication mechanisms right now. This last 3 weeks, we had one campus where we had to solve a problem. And it was quite challenging to find the right group and the right governance body and then solve that problem. So, you know, one of the gaps is figuring out how Senate intersects and acts with local campus governance. So Rhonda, Angelo, Brian, and then Mark, I see your hand and I've put you in the queue.
Hello, everyone. I did want to talk about the communication with the campuses at Three Rivers. Nicola, Joe, and I are going to take turns attending our campus Senate meetings, and I was at ours this week, and we were talking about the communication between state Senate and the campus, and there really needs to be a communication chain. And you know, I did mention that our meetings are online and our minutes are online, and some of them suggested maybe that we send minutes out, us and curriculum, send minutes out via email, because people are more likely to read their email than to go search it out themselves, which I think is a good idea. But since then, I've looked online and I don't see any minutes from curriculum for fall. They have some up for spring, but none for fall. So communication is definitely something we need to work on.
So just on that note, just so that everyone is aware, and if you weren't on the call at the beginning, or if you weren't here at the very beginning of the meeting, we are looking at different ways to communicate with the college. Announcements, emails, and being part of the newsletter are all things that we're looking at. Of course, somebody has to write and create all of that content, so it's not a settled issue, but these are all things that we are currently exploring. And our minutes, just so that everyone knows, our minutes are on the CT State Senate website. So anytime you want to share with your campus the minutes from our meetings, they are on our website. Angelo, you are up next.
Well, thank you so much for having this discussion today. I feel you're saying doubts and thoughts, and it looks like we're learning that senators are kind of becoming like the middleman between the state Senate at the local campuses. And we are supposed to be gathering the issues, the problems that each individual campus has, and bring those concerns to this floor here. Unfortunately, as Alan just mentioned before, not all campuses have the same kind of governance bodies. Some, I mean, most of campuses have a faculty senate, but Middlesex doesn't. So I guess where I'm going with this is I just throw this thought out there. Maybe in the future, we could have all campuses having 3 governance bodies representing the biggest categories of workers. So full-time faculty, CCPs, and part-timers. And they meet regularly every month, and they send the minutes of their meetings to the Senate representing them, and to the senator representing them. And the senator gathers all their issues and brings them over here. Just a thought. They could be more organized so that all campuses had the same governance body structure, so they will function in the same way. That could be easier. But at this time, as it was pointed out, we don't all have the same organization on campus. So it's kind of hard to gather the concerns, issues coming from CCPs, full-time faculty, and part-timers at the same time. So just a thought.
We are certainly collecting ideas. There's no question about that. Thank you. Brian.
Yeah, and I like the concept that communication has played in this whole discussion. And I want to reiterate that I think we need to also, as senators, when we are looking to push forward resolutions on something, whether they're actionable items or something else, that there needs to be discussions with other senators, campus leadership. What is the role of people actually finding out information about that topic and not simply asking or requesting for something to be done or not done by the college senate? I feel like there needs to be more onus on our part to work together as senators. If there's a topic at one campus that's brought forward, is that an issue at another campus? Is that an issue at multiple campuses? And talk with our fellow senators about these topics. Talk with CT State administration on the topic as well before we bring an item forward, and then maybe spend 30 or 40 minutes of the Senate's short time together discussing something that could have been done in the committee structure or just work on our own as senators. So that maybe in the spirit of shared governance as well, that leads to us being more efficient and also being more of a team together and addressing these solutions to see if they're actually, or issues to see if they're actually something that is beyond one campus.
So to your point, Brian, I think one of the things that we are seeing is the need to communicate with one another between meetings to share information. And I think that that's becoming more important to understand the impact of issues across the campuses, because when resolutions come to us and ask for a specific action, if folks have not had the opportunity to find out what is happening at their campus, then a vote is premature and we can actually do harm. And we certainly don't want to do that. We have to be very thoughtful in the votes that we're taking. And I think we are figuring that out as we go along. But I also think that the framework for release, we are continuing to try to get that agreed upon. And I think that once folks, you've all seen it, some of you gave us feedback, most of it was positive. I think that right now folks feel really stretched, that there isn't a uniform way for them to access people or groups on campus, nor do they have the time. And I think the framework for release is an important step so that folks know that they have this time set aside to work on campus issues. And that's important because your perspective as a statewide senator is different from the local campus issues. It's not stronger or better. It's just different because it has to consider Connecticut State Community College in addition to your campus. So, Mark, we're coming back to you.
At Tunxus, we have a body known as the Professional Staff Organization, and it comprises both faculty and staff. And it very luckily just happens to meet the third Thursday of the month. So it lines up well with being able to report the discussions from the Senate meeting to that body. And that's our main vehicle for sharing information from the Senate with the campus community. But as has been noted, I suspect each campus has its own way of doing that, and it may or may not line up with the Senate. So I think as a first start, it would be very interesting to have a spreadsheet seeing how each campus does that, if there is a body where that information is communicated, and then ultimately working toward alignment of having similar bodies at the right time of the month meeting to have a public forum for Senate and Curriculum Congress issues. That concludes my comments.
I will just note that at our last meeting, one of the things I said was that we might need another committee on governance to try to look at this. Mark, I might be asking you to make a motion here shortly, but we're still in the discussion phase. Michelle. Michelle?
Yes, I'm right here. I would like to ask if it's appropriate here to address veteran concerns, meaning that veteran representation when we're thinking about diversity and inclusion and equity. I would like to know, is it appropriate to have veteran representation at these meetings, meaning from the 12 colleges, so that we can make sure that veterans needs are being addressed. I know there's issues that I don't know where to bring as the veteran representative, or if there's even a veteran representative just in general that we've ever thought about. So I think that's very important because there are concerns. And I don't know how that comes about when I'm thinking about where do you bring those? Is Senate appropriate, and should there be a designated person from each college that would be the veteran representative? I know I received communication that they asked, are you the representative? Because I'm putting you on the state website. So of course I am. And so I'm just
Michelle?
curious. Yes.
Yeah, the question you're asking is about representation,
Correct.
and I know you just got access to our documents, but there were a lot of conversations about representation when we first started meeting, and each campus has a faculty, a professional staff, and an at-large. Each of the teaching campuses have those representatives. We do not have representatives in various capacities. We did consider that, and because it becomes a scatter plot, we chose not to go down that direction. It also was not part of the charge for Senate. Now, that doesn't mean that you can't share concerns, especially via email, but not limited. Like if there are specific issues that you want Senate to address, you have the purview to be able to do that. But changing representation is not something that the Senate is currently prepared to do, nor do the charge nor charter provide for that.
Okay, so the process would be, I would have to, for example, if I was not serving on this committee as senator, I'd have to email who directly of what's happening at my campus and bring it forward to the committee, how? And then other persons would vote maybe that there's no veteran representatives on these, or there could be, that don't know the issue at best. Am I correct?
No, no, but let's have a conversation offline.
Okay.
To help you better understand what the process is, just because we can expedite your understanding of the process outside of a meeting time.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Sarah and then Eileen.
One thought is I think it's unclear for both campuses and individuals exactly what is expected when they bring an issue forward. I know my campus had a couple issues we'd like to bring forward, but they were more, okay, here's some issues. We would like the Senate to discuss them and see what solutions can be found at sort of a higher campus-wide level. And I don't think there was really an understanding that resolutions were preferred. So I think that as this body evolves, maybe we have a ad hoc committee for governance, that having it clearly stated maybe on a website, what is expected of campuses when they bring issues forward to us would help clarify. And maybe there's different tracks. Maybe there's a track for resolutions and a track for issues that are a little more nebulous or less developed at campus level. But I think more clarity about what is expected from campuses would be helpful.
And I think that is the part of the purpose of this conversation is to start to figure that out, because next, once we have settled this and we have the budget conversation, we do have our committees meeting for the first meetings. All of you will be meeting. And so I think that's some of what we're trying to figure out right now. Sarah, go ahead.
Yeah, super quick follow-up. I think fully developed resolutions may be unrealistic to expect from campuses all the time. That's it.
I think you're absolutely right. And that's where one of our senators earlier talked about the need for communication between meetings and soliciting input before we get into meetings. So that makes sense. Eileen and then Seth.
I brought this up in the chat, but I wanted to bring it to the body as well, just regarding transparency. And I know that this body is committed to transparency, but I also know that some of the Senate business has to stay within this body. So I wanted to just bring up the issue of the meeting that was scheduled with Dr. Maduco. I don't report to a campus, but I do meet with the campus library directors bi-weekly, and I try to share as much information that I have with them. That particular meeting I did share with directors, because it wasn't clear to me that it wasn't supposed to be shared. So perhaps if we had communications that were very clear in what can be shared and what couldn't be, that would be very helpful too.
That's a great recommendation, and certainly an area where we can direct some more attention. Thank you. Seth.
So I wanted to just share some of my thoughts. I think that the one of the main goals for our governance is to ensure participatory decision making. So both at the campus and obviously statewide. And so I think a lot of what we're doing is trying to ensure that our faculty and staff voices are fully part of the decision making for in CT State. But other times our Senate will just have to want to take positions, frankly, to be critical of management. And that's sometimes why we'll pass resolutions to, if there are decisions that are made and if participatory decision making have not taken place, then we would pass resolutions in some cases to be critical. So, that's just part of the process, and that's what I've seen in governance at Capitol. So I guess we all kind of bring what we've experienced on our campus to this statewide body. So I just think that our group has to expect us to have some kind of growing pains and the norming, forming, storming that happens with any new group, and that'll kind of happen over time. I don't really think it's necessary to have another subcommittee on it. To be frank, I think if we just I think we're going to build the culture as we work at it. So if we bring a resolution and this body thinks it's not appropriate, it'll get voted down. If the body thinks it is appropriate, it'll get endorsed. So I think we'll kind of find our way, and and we'll each bring to the body what we think is effective to ensure participatory decision making. So that's my thought.
So I think I really want to emphasize a recurring theme that we heard, and that is, this is what happens at my campus. There are 13 campuses, 12 teaching plus New Britain, and we all bring different experiences, different organizations to these meetings, and we are learning as we go. So I appreciate all of you participating in this conversation. There were some suggestions made. I'm going to say that if you heard something today that you think we should develop into part of our bylaws, which is one of the committees that will be meeting, please bring that back up. Put that on the agenda or send it to the bylaws committee. We will be sharing the composition of the committees soon. We got the committees formed and started, but we have not shared where everyone is serving yet. But that information will be shared so that you can share your ideas for improving both the effectiveness and the efficiency of the work that we're doing. So thank you. And our time has now expired. Carrie Kelly has joined us. Thank you for waiting for us to finish that conversation. And with this, we are returning to the topic of the budget. Again, it is something of a bifurcated discussion because we did start it at the end of President Maduko's address, but we'll return here. Thank you for joining us, Carrie. We appreciate you taking the time. Is there anything that you would like to say to start, or would you like to just begin with questions?
No, I'm happy to be a guest here with you today, and we're committed to transparency, and so I appreciate the opportunity to respond to questions. I did get 3 written questions from Senator Freeman, but I don't know how you wanted to use the time today. I'm happy to go in any direction you want. So.
Okay, so I see some hands, so we'll go ahead and get started with those questions, and then if you don't have the opportunity to answer Seth's questions, then we will do that at the end. So,
so I'm happy to go. I'll follow your direction, Senator Vandermark. However you want to use the time, wherever you want to begin. So.
Okay, thank you. Miguel, I saw your hand first.
Yep. Carrie, thank you for being here. And I want to thank you and by extension, President Maduko and all the other folks, because I'm sure there were a lot of folks who put together the presentation. And really what I thought was a very professional presentation, delivering some really horrific news. Having said that, that's the good part. All right, let's move on. I do have it's more of a comment than a question, I guess. One of the talking points that we have heard is that this is a no layoff proposal that has been put forth. And while I understand that technically that is correct, when we're talking about the elimination of hundreds of PTLs and EAs, that yes, they have no contract security. Yes, they do not receive layoff notices. Yes, we all know that. I think to a lot of us, those are semantics. And those are people who provide essential services in both the classroom and in our offices that are direct supports to students, who are the direct interfacing folks with students. And I think that it is a bit disingenuous, and I'm trying to say this with all due respect, but I think it's a bit disingenuous to say that this is a no layoff, this is wonderful. I think that perhaps framing it as while, nobody will be receiving a direct layoff notice, we are losing hundreds of positions, right? Because I think that's a critical point that needs to be made, that the BOR needs to hear, that the legislature needs to hear, that the governor's office needs to hear, and that the citizens and taxpayers of Connecticut need to hear. That this is a budget which, a proposed budget mitigation plan, which is going to result in the elimination of literally hundreds of previously existing positions that were temporary because of the nature of the collective bargaining agreement. And I feel like that's been glossed over a little bit. So I would appreciate, and I think others would as well, seeing a little more truth in advertising when we go forth, because I actually think that enhances the case, right? Especially as you're going forth asking for another 40-something million dollars. Maybe it's not 40-something million dollars. Maybe it's $60 million, or maybe it's we need the 91.6. You know, we've identified this, but identifying, you know, what we're proposing is still going to be absolutely disastrous and have long-term significant impact and ramifications, right? And you know, I mean, 3.3 billion, 100 million would bring it down to 3.2 billion. And I know that draining the rainy day fund is not an option, and I get that. But, you know, we seem to have money for all sorts of things. And I know there are discussions going on about changing the fiscal guardrails too. And you know, that's fine. So my big point is, I think in part of the marketing that is coming out, and I'm sure that this will be delivered by the bargaining units and on our side, but I think it would be great out of New Britain if it is no layoffs, but it is a cut of hundreds of positions. I think that would help. I would help the cause. So thank you.
So you're not going to get any argument from me that there's not significant impact to our EAs and what this means to our campuses. You know, I think we were trying to use the language of the contract to be very clear with our board and internal and external stakeholders. But again, if we didn't properly emphasize the impact of reduced EAs on our campuses, then that's an area we can continue to articulate more clearly. You know, again, we want to be really clear. You cannot cut $33.6 million and have current services. I think that's the message that we need to continue to bring forward, right? And so we do have a forecast shortfall of 41.3 now after we do all of the things that we articulated in the upcoming year. That's the amount of money we need right now. I'd like to see more money so that we can unwind many of the things that have been proposed, right? So I'd like to go back to the funding level we had, to our current services level, because that's the level our campuses function best at. So, I mean, that's where our advocacy is. That's what we want, but we have to come forward with a plan that's realistic and that we could implement if we have to. But message received, I don't disagree. I think, you know, we don't want to play a game of semantics, but there are legal distinctions between the two groups. But if in any way, referring to it in that way diminished the importance or the value of our EAs, that's not what was intended.
Yeah, no, and I don't think it was about, I just think I didn't feel like it conveyed the impact sufficiently, because I think that's a very powerful point. And most importantly, the effect it will have on students. I mean, if we already see the lines at registration, if we already, you know, students can't reach the people they need to reach, if nobody can pick up a phone, you know, that's a direct effect. And now you're talking about making worse. Like that is, you know, right, that's the decision that has to be talked about. And the final point I'm going to make is just in terms of something you brought up earlier, Carrie, which was the whole benefit shift thing. I think that's got to be hammered home as well, even more than it has been. Thanks again.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Okay, next up is Nick.
Hi, Carrie. Thanks for being here. Two-part question for you. I think Seth actually asked this of you on Monday at the presentation about the wage reopener that is part of CBAC. So for the 4Cs contract, right, there is a reopener for a general wage increase for fiscal year 24-25. And I'm assuming that the budget deficit that we have, that 41.3 million, does not take into account any general wage increase if there is one. Am I correct in that?
The forecast out year expenditures relied on settled contracts. So of course there can always be reopeners. We didn't budget in any increases because we don't have a settled contract. But should there be a reopener, should we renegotiate, of course, that would be in the expenditures and that would change the out year deficits.
Okay, so it would go up then. Okay.
Well, I mean, whatever that is, and that is all subject to the bargaining.
Oh, that's all subject to CBAC. I understand that 100%. But I just wanted clarity on that.
Yeah, I know it's important to understand what's baked into the underlying numbers. So
Yeah, and then my other part of the question was that 41.3 million deficit that's projected now for 25. I remember that first meeting that we had in September, you brought that little PowerPoint, not little, but the PowerPoint that you provided with a couple slides. And if I remember correctly, the fringe, the new calculations for fringe, I think it was like 49 million for the next fiscal year, if I'm remembering correctly. So is it the Connecticut State's hope that the legislators kind of recalculate how that fringe is calculated and that would help with that 41.3 million deficit? Thank you.
Yeah, there's a lot of confusion here, so I want to be really clear. The way that the state had formerly funded fringe benefits was based on where your funding source was. And for the community colleges, we got so much in our block grant, and for fringe, we got an additional recognition of our unique position. We got an additional supplemental fringe appropriation through the Office of State Comptroller. And functionally, CT State didn't spend very much of the operating fund on fringe. And using the FY22 year, last January, so that was the most recently closed fiscal year, right? OPM came forward with something that they believed was budget neutral. I would say perhaps it was budget neutral in the aggregate for all of the constituent units of higher education, UConn Health Center, UConn, and the CSUs, Charter Oak. But I would argue it's not been budget neutral for us. And so the way that they have moved forward with funding fringe benefits is they would take the retirement pieces, regardless of funding source, and we would take all of the pieces, the other pieces, most notably medical, which is an area that will have unanticipated, well, we don't know the exact amounts of increase, but if you looked at the trend analysis, it's got more volatility in that part. Whereas the retirement piece, although it's significant, has been re-amortized, right? When the state had re-amortized it over a longer period, but plus it's being written down every year by the surpluses. So when the budget reserve fund, the rainy day fund overflows, one of the uses is that it has to extinguish some of the unfunded pension liabilities. So I would argue that's a more predictable out year cost and also one that's less volatile. So we have a new relationship where we're assuming a more volatile piece of this on a broader base, right? So now we're paying for it for everybody. And so what they thought they had accomplished was to make it revenue neutral. So of course our expenditures go down because we're not on the hook for the retirement pieces, but I would argue correspondingly our revenue went down too much. And so you're right, we shared a slide back in the summer, and I think at that point it was like 40, for FY24, I think it was $47 million. In fringe benefit support that we now had to shoulder. Subsequent to this, all of this, that initial estimate, we've had a few months of experience on fringe benefits, and so they're coming in a little lower than we had projected. So we're able to make a technical reestimate. So we had presumed a blended rate of 30% for all employees. It's coming in at 27.4. The folks who don't have significant medical benefits, folks who are under 17 hours, they're very low fringe rate at 7.65. Part-time workers over 17 hours have very high fringe rates vis-a-vis their salary, right? So they're coming in at about 54%, and full-time employees are coming in at 34%. But the blended functional rate is about 27.4, which enables us to re-estimate our expenditures downward, which is favorable by about $6.5 million this year, and we project $8 million in the future. However, that doesn't negate the fact that we are now upside down on the fringe benefit funding model from the state. And so whereas it was, whereas our projection in the summer was at about $47 million, we're now at $40.26 million that we're now shouldering. And I would say, although the numbers come down very slightly, it hasn't changed the fundamental fact that we're now shouldering far more of the fringe benefits than we ever had previously. And this is something we need to continue to articulate in a way, we have to be somewhat delicate about this because a lot of the folks who built this don't want to acknowledge that it doesn't work for us, right? So we continue to have some very targeted and meaningful advocacy with OPM and the legislature to really explain how I believe we're uniquely disadvantaged, unlike some of the other constituent units of higher education. So I know that's a lot. We have some schedules. I'm happy to go through it in greater detail. Again, if folks want to talk about it, but I think the important point is this continues to exacerbate our problem. And the message we got back from OPM was, well, we never promised you it would be revenue neutral forever. We just said it would work on paper in FY22. I don't even think it worked using FY22 data. And now this is a new relationship we're going to live with going forward.
Okay, thank you. All right, so we've got one more question, and that is from Angelo. And then if you could pivot in after you answer Angelo's question to answering the questions that Seth asked, we will go ahead and wrap this up. Angelo, you're up next.
Yes, I'm here. Hi, Carrie. How are you? I'd like to talk about the tuition raises. As you know, pretty much all public institutions, higher ed institutions, have been doing that to our students quite often over the years. And my question is, like, isn't raising tuition like a double-edged sword? I mean, the assumption that by raising the tuition by 5% every year, that's supposed to be bringing money in. Well, that happens if those students continue in coming to our campuses in the same number or maybe higher. But isn't there also concern that by raising tuitions, students go away, not coming at all, so that the projected additional increase in funding will actually be missing and not reached just because the tuition increases? Based on your experience, what is the result with the student registration when we raise the tuition of students?
Well, I see somebody else's hand up, so I'm going to first defer to my boss, President Maduco, and I have some materials that I prepared in anticipation of this, so I'll follow on after his comments.
Yeah, I mean that's a great question, and again, we hear loud and clear advocacy from our bargaining units and really just our employees and really the state and citizens. Why put the cost on the backs of students? And it's a tough position to be in terms of we're trying to maintain, whatever level of diminishing services that we can provide for the very students that depend on everything that we do. In my opinion, in the Minnesota system that I acknowledge is a different system, but very similar in terms of funding mechanisms, in terms of its state appropriations and its tuition and fee revenue. It was just reversed. 65% of all revenue was tuition and fees in Minnesota compared to the 35% from state appropriations. And often when the state was like, yeah, we're not giving additional appropriations to public higher ed, whatever that is, in the shared governance structure in Minnesota, you have to meet and confer with SGA to say, hey, based on, a decrease in state appropriations, we're proposing an increase of tuition by 5%. There was never pushback from our students, and there was never pushback from the community college unions in Minnesota, because the reason why was we can't afford to lose the very resources that we know are supporting the students. And, we would demonstrate that it still falls under the quote unquote Pell threshold, at least at that time. I think for the first time in 10 years, Minnesota has now frozen tuition because Minnesota has gone all in terms of their General Assembly, in terms of funding free college tuition, not only for community colleges, but also four-year institutions. That is a different discussion for a different day. But in my experience, we didn't see a decline in enrollment. And also, too, we made sure that we ramped up institutional scholarships. And also we ensured that we ramped up the scholarships and funding especially in the forms of emerging funding from our foundations. And, so we're in this tough situation where we don't have another level of revenue to pull, right? And we know how important and significant, our in-class and out-of-class, services are, right? And we've seen some diminishing of that. So we're just trying to hold the line while we're trying to kind of combat and work with the state and whomever to try and maintain or receive our full funding. So that's the best answer. But I agree with you. Fundamentally, it goes against, right, the mission of community colleges in terms of affordability and accessibility. But we don't have a local tax base like California and Texas, where you just tax the counties, and that's your primary form of funding. That's a subsidy. That's not a part of our funding model here in Connecticut.
Thank you.
Take you through a few numbers that I prepared in anticipation after receiving some of the written questions. So if you don't mind, I'll share my screen. Hopefully you can all see this. So again, I think to build on what President Manduca, can you all see this?
Yes.
Yes.
Not as proficient at WebEx as I am Teams. But as President Manduca was saying, if we don't increase tuition, not only are we giving it up for that year, but every year thereafter into the future, I think it's a very considered decision, and one that we have to think about. How does this dovetail with PACT, a program that should be expanding, serving an expanding number of students, as the law is going to be changing for next fall to allow students who had previously taken credits with us to come back. And I think, again, we're still awaiting some of the FAFSA simplification. So just wanted to share that, using an FY25 enrollment projection with a 2% decline, we believe this would yield a net $2.2 million in additional revenue. That was already contemplated into our initial forecast. And that is after the 15% tuition set aside. So anytime we raise tuition, we correspondingly increase the amount of money that goes to students. Just to contextualize this, for a 1 credit experience, it would be an increase of $15 on tuition and college services fee. And for a full-time student, it would be an increased cost of $246. We have some information here to share about the federal Pell Grant award limit. We're still awaiting the publication that happens in January about what the Pell threshold is. But again, even with the cost of attendance and an allowance for books, it's still below that threshold. We don't take any of this lightly, and we really want to understand our place in the marketplace, and have been looking at the affordability of other neighboring states through New England, New York, and New Jersey. And I wanted to share with you a table that we sourced from the College Board, Trends in College Pricing. It's published this past October. I know it's hard to see. The orange bar is the US median, but Connecticut's about right here. And all the New England states are really here, New York and New Jersey. Maine is the only state that is cheaper than us as of October of 23. So this is, again, something that I think is important. It'll be coming before the Finance Committee in early December, the Student Advisory Committee, and ultimately the board. We will add this appendix to our website so everyone can see this. So I'll stop.
Well, I'm only hoping that we're going to reach a point where we're going to be stopping raising tuition every other year for our students, that we're going to reach a stability, financial and personnel wise, so that we can really pay attention to what the reason why we're here, which is education, and not having to always go after a buck or two to make things running and working properly.
Thank you, Angelo. All right, folks. So we are 7 minutes over allotted time, and Carrie hasn't had a chance to address Seth's questions. Seth, do you have those questions handy, or Carrie, can you read the question so that we know what you are answering? Oh, you're on mute. I don't know how that happened.
Right in front of me, but I think they really centered on 3 things. The first being tuition. So I prepared the page, and I can share it here in the chat after I'm done presenting. And also, as I said, we'll be posting it to our website as well. So I think that responded to the first question about where we are in tuition. And I think the specific question was, what was the net increase in revenue we projected? And that's $2.2 million after the tuition set aside that comes out of that. That's 15%. And that presumes a 2% enrollment decline. Remember, this current year, we forecast a 3% enrollment decline, and we outperformed our forecast by bringing in where enrollments essentially stabilized to the prior year. So let's hope we can outperform that, but we want to budget conservatively. Second, I think the second question, if I'm not mistaken, was about full-time positions. Is that right?
Full-time vacancies?
And is that right?
Yeah, the 53 full-time permanent positions.
Okay, great. So I prepared some material as well. I'm going to say it is hard to see, but hopefully when I post it to the website, it's a little bit more readable. But let me share my content here. So the question was, what is the impact in the full-time? Can you all see this?
Now we can.
Okay, great. So the question that I received is, what is the net change in headcount that was referred to in our more comprehensive report of 53? And that is really the comparison of the positive changes and the negative changes in headcount. And there are some that had no effect on headcount that we would deem neutral. And then here's the aggregate. So again, it's very hard to see because of the columns off to the right for the campuses, but I'll just increase the size so we can see what the categories are, and then you can follow along and when we post this. So in the plan that we put forward, there were 492 initiatives, and some of them were to recognize costs and expenditures that had been incurred that were not budgeted. So for example, if a position was hired that was unbudgeted, that would increase the gross target that campus had to achieve because they had hired a person that was not contemplated in the budget. And so those are the kinds of things that are in the positive category. So employees who return to a permanent position after a special appointment, hiring budgeted positions vacated through attrition. So those are positive actions. Hiring unbudgeted positions, increased pay due to impact bargaining, and a position moved from grant funding to operating. So this reflects the changes in headcount, right? These are the things that are of a negative impact. Adjust the budget based on actuals. So in some cases, the actual expenditures were lower. We delayed and rehired and used part-time or temporary staff, delay the rehire to FY25. That was one of the changes that you probably saw a lot in Appendix C. In some cases, we eliminated positions. As we highlighted in the report, there were significant reductions to the management structure. So you can see that here in the college office. Employee vacated the position for a permanent, vacated a permanent position for a special appointment. One-time savings due to an unpaid leave of absence. So these are all things that could negatively affect the headcount. And then there are a number of things here that are somewhat neutral. For example, a new position, if there was a delay in hiring it through the natural course of hiring, right? We budgeted it for the 26 pay periods of the year. That person wasn't hired perhaps until October. That would be captured here. Some employees have gone on voluntary schedule reduction or adjustments. So it doesn't affect the head count, but there are certainly dollar impacts. So the top of the schedule, and I'll zoom out so you can see it, shows the net impacts, both positive and negative, and that yields a change in head count downward of 53. And we're showing this on a campus by campus basis. And then below that, and again, it's very hard to see in this size, but I do have a PDF that prints a whole lot better, and I'll be putting up on the website, and that shows the dollar impacts with fringe for FY24. And so we will be publishing that for you all and happy to share that in the chat as well, if that's easier.
And just a question, will you be coming into the budget subcommittee today?
I didn't know that that was happening today. When is it happening?
So it's going to happen today. Seth, I didn't extend an invitation today. Carrie, if you have time, we're going to take a 10-minute break after our next item of business, which should be relatively quick. So we'll have a short break, and then we're going to have our first committee meetings. If you're available, you're certainly welcome to join. I know you told me that your schedule was already difficult today.
I mean, I can try to juggle. Do you have a stop time that you were envisioning this to go to? Because I'm not sure I'll be able to stay with you the whole time, but.
So ideally, the committee meetings will start about 2:20, maybe 2:25. I think even if you could be there in the beginning, maybe you guys could set up some meeting dates and talk about document sharing. Anything you can do to meet with that committee
I'm
would
happy
be.
to. I'll try to rejuggle some things in our 10 minutes and be there. And if you could email me if it's a breakout room or some other place that you'd like me to go.
We believe we have fixed it so we can just put people in rooms, but we will find out.
All right. Well, if I don't make it, you know where to find me.
All right. Thank you. All right, folks. Thank you. Please keep in mind, as you have questions, comments, thoughts, concerns, we do have a budget committee, and we will be meeting, all of our committees will be meeting for the first time as soon as two things happen. First, we're going to talk briefly about the APP process with Provost Brown, and then we're going to take a bio break. So, Provost Brown, are you still with us?
I am.
Great. So Senate had some questions about why we chose to utilize college Senate versus statewide governance bodies, but also more generally, what is the purpose of APP? Why are we doing this work? And what kind of work can we expect the faculty who join this committee to participate in? If I miss something, I am very confident senators will raise questions directly to you.
Sounds good. Look, thank you, Professor Vandermark. Really quickly, I know we are pressed for time, but this goes back to June of this year when the CSCU Board of Regents passed a resolution charging the chancellor to lead all of the institutions within the system in a comprehensive effort to review academic and student support programs to ensure they're meeting the mission of CSCUs, also the great state of Connecticut, in a cost-effective manner. The purpose of the APP process is to assess the effectiveness, relevance, and alignment of our existing academic programs and support services with the rapidly evolving landscape of the marketplace, right, and jobs and our economy. And so that is the overall purpose. And that information also can be found in a joint document that was sent from the president's office and my office on October the 2nd, I believe it was. And with that being said, that document is a guiding document. We have been asked to engage in the APP process along with our other the other institutions within the system. And we took, as we stated, I believe in previous meetings, we took a more intentional approach in slowing down that process because we felt that we were such a new and forming college, multi-campus, large institution under our first, beginning our first semester, that it would not be the most appropriate thing to launch this type of process earlier on. And as some of the CSCUs actually began to communicate this work and what their potential plans were in the month of August, right? And so we intentionally slowed down. We wanted to involve our key governance leaders. We wanted to better understand the process and what was the expectation from the system office, from the Board of Regents. And so we have more clarity at this point, but we had a chance to speak with Professor Vandermark in a conversation, Professor Freeman, and other key stakeholders such as Professor Seabury as well. And so with that being said, we're at a point now where we need to engage and have the conversations as a committee. And so in order to really make sure that we're maintaining being an inclusive leadership group and respecting and adhering to shared governance, we wanted to make sure that we included faculty voices. And so that is the reason why we came to this body and to really make sure that we would get as many voices as possible to help us shape these conversations. Really, our intentions are to really position ourselves, study data, right? To study data, to learn more about our programs, looking at internal and external data, and determining, hopefully we will see, what opportunities can we strengthen programs that already exist, but also are there new opportunities out there based off of labor market information, based off of information that we're receiving from offices such as OWS and other stakeholders that we can really build upon meeting the needs, the educational and training needs of our citizens here in the great state of Connecticut. And so that's our purpose. We wanted to be clear also, and I've shared this in conversation with everyone that I've talked to. President Maduko has said something very similar. This is not an exercise for us to close programs. We're looking to, if anything, with the key stakeholders, to strengthen our programs and to discover what we can offer that we may not be offering, and hopefully grow our opportunities to educate our students. And so essentially, that's where we are. There is a group, there's a work group that was formed about 6 weeks ago that started to become more educated on the academic program review process. So that group will just roll over and will merge with the faculty individuals who have been recommended from Senate. But that group includes, key stakeholders from the institutional effectiveness team, Dr. Matheson. Also, Mike Stefanowicz is working with us in this work. Dr. David DiMatteo is working with us as well because of some of his experiences, as well as we have 2 campus CEOs who are part of that APR group, CEO DeBonage from CT State Norwalk, as well as Dr. Dressner, CT State Naugatuck, and Dr. Joseph Cullen has provided us with some insights on what we have done for APR and educated us, which we found that would be very educational for us as we go through any type of APP processes and conversations. So long story short, that's the purpose of APP. We're looking forward to having our first joint group meeting to really kick off the formal work in December, as was stated. One thing I want to note as well as all the institutions were asked to provide an update on where they stand with the APP process. That update was due on October 30th. We did submit that to the system office. And basically what we shared is a summary of what I just quickly talked through, is that we were forming the group. We took time to study our internal processes, and also we were strategically involving our key stakeholders, including faculty voices, and that we seek to have our first joint meeting in December of 2023 and proceed to have meetings in the following semester of spring of 2024. So that's an overview of APP, hopefully in less than 4 or 5 minutes.
Thank you. We do have some questions for you. Seth, you're up.
Thank you. My question is, how will this new APP committee work with the existing governing curricular bodies like SDCs and the SACCs and the Curricular Congress? So, like, is the APP committee kind of like, is the goal for that group to kind of coordinate, be some of a coordinating body that then actually works with the SDCs, who will then be generating the recommendations, or the APP itself generating the recommendation and not in partnership with the existing bodies?
So the APP committee would definitely work with other bodies, but that group would be the ones that would at least generate some level of recommendations from the study, but reporting out, right, and sharing insights that were gained from key conversations and meetings. And so it's not to be done in a vacuum, because there are multiple representatives from key faculty areas. And so the goal is to share the information out that is being discussed, what was found, what the progress of the group is as we move along the way. Of course, this is not fully baked out, right? This is not a prescribed process. So I dare to be too prescriptive, because we actually want to let the group actually shape out how we communicate and all of that, because that has not been discussed formally, and we did not want to be too prescriptive with that. That's why we have the committee forming.
Seth, I want to add one more thing that we talked about when Provost Brown met with Jason from Curriculum Congress and I, and that was, once we have the representatives from each of the campuses, there will be a cross-check done to see if the FDCs and the SACCs are represented, and additional members may be added. So that was an important level to make sure that we had not just campus representation, but the other levels of governance are involved. We, the Senate, won't be involved with identifying those folks, but that work will be done on the back end to identify more possible faculty participants to make sure that all levels of governance are recognized.
So I guess my first response would be, why don't we just use the SDCs to generate recommendations from the ground up? And why do we need this new subcommittee in the first place?
Mike?
Yeah, I could just share, and I put this in the chat. The charges of the SDC, SAC, and Curriculum Congress are relatively specific, and they really relate to reviewing curriculum and making recommendations. They currently don't include those charges, don't include assessment nor academic program review. If you think about our current practices at our legacy colleges, current campuses, I don't think many curriculum bodies performed program reviews. They may have gotten reports on those, but usually it's the local department or discipline or program that does the program review. And those are then presented to the academic dean at the campus. So I'm not saying that they couldn't do that, Seth, but I do think that would involve a little bit of a pivot. That was not what those groups were designed to do. And those groups are quite busy. Curriculum Congress is having a challenge, keeping up with the flow of curriculum items. We're doing a lot of cleanup and catch up for things that didn't happen during alignment. I think that would be an additional burden on those bodies. And I'm sure people would advocate, including yourself, for more compensation and for the time needed if they were going to take on those tasks. So just some of my personal opinion, but I do think they were not built for that purpose, I guess I would say. And I think that I won't speak for Provost Brown, but the board process is in addition to our standard regular cycle of academic program review, this APP, and kind of needs perhaps a different group of people or a task force or work group, something like that.
Yeah,
Yeah, and Mike, that's a great point, or great points in general, because in talking with other colleagues as well, and each institution is different, right? But the majority of the institutions utilize separate groups of faculty, but found a way to really engage and share information across their institution. And so, after some thought and a lot of deliberation, we felt that this approach would be viable as we look to move forward, because we do have to get the work done as well. And there's an expectation that we turn this around and be able to report out to the Board of Regents in the spring.
So we're program coordinators who are currently responsible for program review, that they were consulted and they said that they wanted to hand that over to the APP committee? That's what I'm hearing, that the program coordinators who are currently responsible, that's kind of being taken out of their hands and the APP committee doing it.
So Seth, that I don't think, it's not sure that I said that. They will still do their regular academic program review. That's still board policy on a rotating cycle. I think it's a 7-year window. That task has not been taken away from them. I think this is an additional project. But Provost Brown, I'll let you answer. And I see President Duco's hand up.
That's absolutely correct. And you know, we have not changed the duties or task of anyone. Again, I just want to reiterate, even as Mike stated, that this is an additional ask for those who we put the call out to. So nothing has changed with the APR academic program review process. That is still going to take place, and Dr. Cullen and team lead that effort. However, the APP is a separate process, and of course, that's one of the primary reasons why we wanted to tap or seek feedback on those individuals who could join us in that particular work. And I'll pause. I see President Maduka.
Yeah, I'll just quickly add for all of our colleagues on this call, please reach out to the CSUs. The amount of angst that took place because the CSUs issued this edict from the Board of Regents and the Chancellor prior to even their faculty coming back on contract, and all hell broke loose. And just being a pragmatist and seeing that, I said, no, we're going to drag our feet, and one, wait for our faculty to be back on contract, and then two, talk to governance leaders and union leaders and say, hey, we've been given this charge. Like CT State didn't wave her hand saying, this is what we want to do on top of opening a new college and everything else is on fire, right? The Board of Regents is 6 institutions. This is what you have to do. And we felt that at the very least, engaging with our governance leaders saying, hey, let's do this together and let the committee kind of formulate a way to, I guess, quote unquote, do the task, but not to usurp any of our programs, our leaders, et cetera. We felt like that was the best, path forward with a very unique charge that has been issued. Like that was, again, that was our calculus behind it, but it was not to say program coordinators, you no longer have to do X, Y, and Z. This is not program review. Program review and APP are separate processes. I know everyone's saying that because the program review has its own details and people who have their role. And even NetSheet details, hey, there has to be a program review process when it comes to curriculum. This APP is per the Board of Regents.
So I think our Senate should make a recommendation on how we want to have our governance contribute to this APP process. Because I'm not convinced what you're describing is, if I'm on the SGC and I'm being told that our SGC for computer science, for the sake of argument, is not going to be making recommendations, but there's going to be this other body, this APP, that's going to be reviewing all the curriculum, including my program, and then coming to recommendations for my program. I don't see why I would be supportive of that structure, as opposed to involving the SGCs from the ground up. So that's my confusion, and also I don't see the distinction between program review, with all that entails, the market analysis, how our programs are doing, meeting industry need, and the APP, which is doing the same thing, but yet you're saying they're different.
Yeah.
I- I-
Oh,
I'm at-
there are different because let's be real about program review at any institution. To do all programs at once is insane. That's why program reviews are typically there is a schedule, right, to give just breathing room for that type of work to be done. This is extremely different because one, it was issued by the Board of Regents to all institutions, regardless of what's going on. So that, to me, that's the stark difference because there's no cycle, right?
Sure.
And then and then two, in no way are we saying for people to even one like this, support this, or even agree with this. All we're saying is this was quote unquote an edict per the Board of Regents, and we're just trying to be compliant with the board. But we welcome people to lose their minds when it comes to this process. Because trust me, I wasn't like, yes, let's add something else to what we have to do. So just let us be clear, administration, we're not cheering and being happy about putting this on our people or whatever, saying that, hey, everyone please just rubber stamp it. We welcome the discourse and the disagreement from government to say, oh, hell no, we got some ideas and some issues with X, Y, and Z. Hence, we're in this forum.
Good. So I think that's why our Senate should discuss if we think what's being proposed, this APP structure, that is, again, in my opinion, basically isolating the existing curricular bodies is the best way to go. So I'm interested to hear if others think what's being proposed is I don't know if others have concerns about the lack of inclusion of our other, or the exclusion of our existing curricular bodies that I do. I'm curious to hear what others think.
So I want to pivot to Nick, and I'm also going to point out that we're 10 minutes over. People are emailing me and texting me asking for a break. So we are going to wrap this up. Seth, if you find that perhaps we need to do this in a different way, that is the kind of off-meeting dialogue that I think we need to start engaging in more meaningfully.
Well, no, but I think our Senate needs to come to a decision if we want to participate in this process, if we think it's flawed. And I currently think it's, in its current iteration, it seems pretty flawed. So I think because it's already been requested for our Senate to start to solicit folks from our campus. But if we're not comfortable and we think this is going to be a problematic process, then we should be clear that we don't want to do that.
Okay. Nick, you have a question or a comment?
Two questions. What do we expect the size of this APP committee to be? I need to, in case I get asked that. And then second, how does Connecticut State plan to leverage any of the recommendations that come out of this committee? Especially if the recommendations as far as increasing program offerings or new program offerings are actually going to have a very high initial cost outlay, like surgical tech, radiology tech, sonography, those types of things, right? Healthcare degrees are in high demand, but they are quite cost prohibitive to get off the ground. I know we could, at Three Rivers, we could easily get 3 or 4 programs going, but with the current budget deficit that we have, how do we expect to be able to meet any of these recommendations that are made? Thank you.
Hey, I'll start with that one. I think the beauty with the recommendations is we don't have to follow through a recommendation, right? I think other factors can be pressing, i.e. perfectly our finances, right? There might be a schism between APP and then our conventional governance bodies. I welcome that. That's the purpose of governance. And I think the APP committee, they have to determine what the quote unquote structure cadence is going to look like, right? Hence going to governance and saying, help us kind of put this group together versus, and Provost Brown mentioned earlier, it wasn't prescribed in terms of this is what the APP committee should consist of. This is what it should look like, etc. And I welcome that versus we're hand delivered something that's cookie cutter that's immediately going to conflict with what's going on. I feel that there is room for the institution, our faculty, others to kind of push back, saying APP might say one other thing, but there's people in the trenches that feel something else. And like we welcome that discourse. Like this is nothing to quote unquote tell the institution to move in one direction. But I think people need to read in between the lines. This came from the Board of Regents. Like like again, I think I use the word fire and belief show every other hour, right? Like I'm not, we didn't voluntarily like want to put this on the back of our people, but at the very least, we were decent enough to drag our feet because we were supposed to issue this in the summer prior to faculty being on contract. And I said, over my dead body, I said, let them come back on contract. And the first thing we did is reach out to Professor Freeman and reach out to Professor Vandermark and reach out to our curricular Congress, leader and say, hey, this is what's going on. This is what's came for the board. We're giving you a heads up versus the steps that the other institutions took. So I feel that it's not going to be perfect. I anticipate there's going to be conflict, and we're going to have to make the best for it. And also too, I welcome the APP and others to put concerns about the entire process in the recommendations about what this has meant. Like the other CSUs, man, there are resolutions regarding the APP process, man. Our faculty are no different. Our faculty do not mince words when it comes to anything. So we actually want that inertia, right? To at least keep this process honest,
Marcia.
Yeah.
So folks,
I think it's eyes.
if there is a motion to do something else, we can certainly entertain that. But I will share with you that President Meduco and the provost met with both Curricular Congress Chair and myself. We discussed different options for how this might work. We came to the conclusion that going through statewide Senate and asking senators to go back to their campuses was the most inclusive and most inclusive process that utilized statewide governance. We considered going through the campuses and utilizing curriculum and standards or gen ed committees. It was a too diverse process, but we came up with the solution that utilizing senators meant that we were going through senators from statewide Senate meant we were utilizing statewide governance. We were drawing from each of the campuses, and then on the backside, once individuals were identified, we would also compare who was on the committee and take a look at SDCs and SACCs to make sure representation was there. If you feel that this is insufficient, by all means make a motion and let's move forward in a different way. But those are the things, that's the work that happened on the back end of this.
I'll make a motion. So I'll make a motion that we pause how we fill the APP until we've had more time to discuss it. I think a better option would be to have each SACC.
No, this is not.
I mean, to be clear, just so we're clear, our Senate hasn't. I mean, we're having this conversation like our Senate made a decision about how to construct this committee, and our Senate hasn't. So, irrespective of the conversation that management has had with any handful of individuals, our Senate hasn't come to any recommendation on how we think this should be formed. And I'm just thinking, well, one person from Capitol, for sake of argument, making recommendations on all the programs doesn't seem the most inclusive or representative way of doing it. I mean, that's just my opinion. But one person that doesn't have knowledge or expertise of, all the programs, I think that's a big, heavy burden on one person from all of our campuses. So I just we can't find a more representative way and inclusive way to do it than what's been proposed. So I would just propose we.
Seth, can you just clearly state your motion for the minutes, please?
My motion would be that we identify. We do not use the methodology proposed so far, and we identify a improved way of selecting the APP representation. So I'm not in support of what's been proposed so far.
President Meduco, is your hand up to comment, or can I see if there's a second first?
No, please yank my hand down, please. My bad.
Okay. Is there a second? Hearing no second, the motion dies. All right, folks. That means that we will continue with our current process where senators will move forward and solicit participation from their campuses. We are going to take a quick break. I'm going to ask that we keep it to just 7 minutes. And when we come back, we will have our first committee meetings. So we'll take a 7-minute break. Thank you, folks. John, as we're coming back in, you have created the rooms for each of the committees, is that right?
Not yet.
So we will have,
Fired.
we'll have the elections committee, bylaws, budget, admin, and bookstore.
Admin, bookstore, budget, bylaws, election. Yep. Mhm.
Okay.
Is that what we're going directly into now?
I believe so. I'm taking a look at our agenda, and I believe that is the last thing that we have.
Doing it now.
Quick question.
May-
I
oh,
think
I'm sorry. I was just gonna ask, may I be added to the bookstore? That's where I would direct the concern to. This is Michelle.
Yep, we can add you to that committee.
Thank you so much.
Yes, ma'am.
some of
Angela?
us were actually volunteer for different committees.
I'm sorry?
Some of us are volunteering to join different committees.
Mhm.
Are those committees taking place at the same time?
Yeah, so for our initial meeting, what we've done is we've given everyone a primary committee. And then once those committees meet, the meeting times will be shared. So if you want to attend and participate on the other committees, that's at your discretion. But you will have one primary committee and we'll work with that. We could not accommodate multiple requests. Yeah, you know how hard that gets, Angelo.
Well, I'm really adamant about the cap and the bookstore.
Yeah, the course cap isn't a committee, Angelo. That was something that Asanto was working on. So that's something different.
Okay, and what's the schedule for that one? We don't know.
No, I don't.
Okay.
But I did see that you emailed her and let her know that you wanted to work.
Yeah, I did. I did. All right. Well, thank you.
All right, John, are folks able, you are sharing your screen? Oh, are you telling people to join?
That was the goal.
Okay, there we go.
I just gotta zoom in a little bit here to make it easier. Whoops, zoom in here. So,
all right, folks. So please join the room for the committee that you are in, and go ahead and join these rooms. And Carrie, if you are still here, if you could join the Budget and Finance Committee, that would be very useful.
I will do that. I am really not as proficient at this as, breakout session. Let me see.
So if you open your participants window, if you open the participants, there's a join button for any committee that you wish to join.
Could you stop sharing? Maybe we could see things easier. I'm really having a hard time even getting to my. Thank you.
are there folks that don't know what committee they're in?
I see now.
I'm not seeing where we can join the group, the different groups. I am under my participants and I'm not seeing an option to be able to do that.
I'm in the breakout session, John, where you go to breakout sessions at the top of the screen, join breakout session, but I don't see the professional.
Professional is not one of the options.
Okay.
Professional council is a council and we're just doing the committees here.
Okay.
So Bonnie, you should be in admin, HR, and staffing. Do you see up the top of participants, there's a main meeting and then a breakout session? That's great. All right, so do you see where it says participants?
Yeah, I have participants open and I'm seeing.
Yeah, so
if
just
they're
below
signing.
that, do you see a search? A search bar there?
No.
Bonnie, there's also, do you have a menu at the top of your window?
At the top of my menu, I have just the layout at the moment. I have the show menu, hide menu bar, meeting information, and WebEx. I don't have another one where I usually see the breakout session because I did this morning. Here they are. All of a sudden now the hyperlink is showing is what it is. Okay. Wasn't showing it before where the search mechanism was. So thank you.
Yep, you're welcome.
Hi, I'm sorry. I think I know where I'm supposed to be going, but there was a 2 next to my name under where I was, and I just don't know what the 2 means. Was there another spot that I should be in?
No, that's exactly where you should go. It was just that it was your second choice.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Yep. Is anyone else having trouble?
I think everybody else, once Stephen goes, everybody's in their proper room, John.
Fantastic. All right, I'll head over to election.
John, do you know, because we're recording, do you know if I can go in a room or do I take the camera with me if I do that?
Actually, I don't know. We haven't tested that before.
I'm going to give it a shot, see what happens.
I'll see what happens.
10 seconds, folks, but how did your meeting go? Yay. We needed a good win today. All right, I'm bringing everybody back. Well, I thought I was bringing everybody back. Oh, here they come. Okay. Well, I tried to bring everybody back and it gave them a 1-minute warning. So I have so much less power than I think I have. There we go. All right. Everyone should be back in the main meeting. Was everyone able to identify someone who can poll the committees to establish subsequent meeting times? I see some thumbs up. Yes. Okay, very good. All right, folks. If that is the last item on our agenda, was to facilitate the first committee meetings. Does anyone have anything? Yes, thank you, Angelo. It was a success. Does anyone else have any announcements before I ask for a motion to adjourn? Stephen?
Hi, everyone. Happy Friday. I was told I would ask because our Senate was trying to bring up another vote of no confidence issue, and someone was trying to pull what the state of other campuses was, and if there was any representatives that were also bringing something to their own campuses, because this is realizing going after the Chancellor Chang that this would have to be like a huge united issue, and some people didn't want to bring something forward without knowing how the other campuses felt. So I didn't know if this was an appropriate time to gauge what other campuses were doing, or if they had a plan, or if anything has been brought to their individual.
What campus are you on?
Norwalk.
Gateway is waiting for you to act.
Miguel and then Seth.
Yeah, I just had a quick question. So this is regarding the bookstore committee. If we need documents, who do we liaise with? Like who?
This is a great question. So I will say that I actually thought that I would be able to go into each of the rooms to give each committee some additional information, but I took the camera with me when I did that. So I came back and I just stayed here. Actually, Carrie Kelly has a small group of people who have been working on problems with the bookstore, Miguel, and they are very eager to work with our bookstore committee. And I suspect she will be able to get everything that you folks need.
And I see she's still on the call, so maybe I'll reach out to her because specifically one of the things we want to take a look at is the actual contract between CT State and Follett. At least in my mind, how can we vitiate it and change it? But that notwithstanding, at least get a copy of it and read it, because I think we need to be more informed consumers. So I'll reach out to Carrie Kelly. Thanks.
Anything else? Seth, I'm not ignoring your hand. I just mean, I'm trying to circle back on the committee. Okay, Seth?
Just for Stephen, Capitol has shared their no confidence resolution with the campus, but we haven't decided, the Senate hasn't decided to take it up for a vote yet.
All right, folks. So please make sure. Oh, John.
I just want to say that Northwestern has also had a conversation with the Pro Senate, but has asked people to reach out directly to their union representatives.
And Roberta.
I just wanted to add on to what Alan said. We, it hasn't been widely distributed on our campus, kind of waiting to see how it goes at Norwalk. And then we anticipate that it will likely be endorsed, just based on the feel of folks that are in the know. But if everyone is sharing it widely across their campuses, then I think that we all need to know that.
So I don't think that folks in general know what we are talking about, or I'm concerned that they don't, because I am not aware of, so what we are talking about, folks, is a vote of no confidence resolution that was written, as I understand it, by one campus and has been shared in a limited fashion with some people at some other campuses. But there is currently a vote of no confidence being considered in in Chancellor Chang. Roberta, did you want to add something to that?
No. Would you like me to?
No. Your hand was still up.
Yeah,
Your
I
hand was still
apologize.
up.
Thank you.
All right, folks, is there a motion to adjourn? Oh, Seth, I'm sorry. I just saw your hand. My apologies.
Oh, thank you. I was just gonna say, if anybody wants a copy, email me. I'll share the copy of Capitals if anyone wants a copy to review.
Is that also a motion to adjourn, Seth?
It is, and a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Are there any objections?
Don't dare.
All right, folks, we will not see one another again, so I hope everyone has a lovely Thanksgiving and you really
You
take
too,
time.
thanks.
You really take time to refresh.
Likewise.
And have happy holidays, however it is that you celebrate them.
Yeah.
Happy Thanksgiving.
Thank you.
everyone.
Bye.
Happy
Bye.
Thanksgiving, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Happy
Happy
Bye,
Thanksgiving.
everyone.
Al, we have a meeting on December 22nd.
Bye-bye.
Al,
Yes.
we have a meeting scheduled